Allow him to speak to our hearts. There are going to be moments where we pray for you and prophesy over your life so that God can start to speak destiny into you. What we want for you at this school is to get God inside of you as much as possible. We want to get you full of God so that what.
Here we go. Well, Judges is moving right along. Now the men of Ephraim said to him, "Why have you done this to us by not calling us when you went to fight with the Midianites?" And they reprimanded him sharply. So he said to them, "What have I done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? God has delivered into your hands the princess of Midian, Oreb and Zeb, and what was I able to do in comparison with you?" Then their anger toward him subsided. When he said that. When Gideon came to the Jordan, here we go, he and the 300 men who were with him crossed over, exhausted but was still in pursuit. Then he said to the men of Succoth, "Please give loaves of bread to the people who follow me, for they are exhausted, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, kings of Midian." And the leaders of Succoth said, "Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread to your army?" So Gideon said, "For this cause, when the Lord has delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, then I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars." Then he went up from there to Peniel and spoke to them in the same way. And the men of Peniel answered him as the men of Succoth did and answered. So he also spoke to the men of Peniel and saying, "When I came back in peace, I will tear down this tower." Now Zebah and Zalmunna were at Karkar, and their armies with them, about 15,000 of them. All who were left were of all the army of the people of the east, for 120,000 men who drew the sword had fallen. Then Gideon went up by the road of those who dwell in tents on the east of Nobah and Jogbeha, and he attacked the army while the camp felt secure. When Zebah and Zalmunna fled, he pursued them, and he took the two kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and routed the whole army. Then Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from battle from the ascent of Hares. And he caught a young man of the men of Succoth, and he interrogated him. And he wrote down for him the leaders of Succoth and its elders, 77 men. Then he came to the men of Succoth and said, "Here are Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you ridiculed me, saying, 'Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread to your weary men?' And he took the elders of the city and the thorns of the wilderness and the briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth. Then he tore down the tower of Peniel and killed the men of the city. And he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, 'What kind of men were they whom you killed at Tabor?' So they answered, 'As you are, so were they. Each one resembled the son of a king.' Then he said, 'They were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As the Lord lives, if you had let them live, I would have not killed you.' And he said to Jether, his firstborn, 'Rise, kill them.' But the youth would not draw his sword, for he was afraid, because he was still young. So Zebah and Zalmunna said, 'Rise yourself and kill us. For as a man is, so is his strength.'" In other words, you don't send somebody to do your job, get up and do it yourself. So Gideon arose and killed Zebah and Zalmunna and took his crescent ornaments that were on their camels' necks. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, "Rule over us, both you and over your son, and your grandson also, for you have delivered us from the hand of Midian." But Gideon said to them, "I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you." Then Gideon said to them, "I would like to make a request to you that each of you would give me earrings from his plunder, for they had golden earrings, because they were Ishmaelites." So they answered, "We will gladly give them," and they spread out a garment, and each man threw into the earrings from his plunder. Now the weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments, pendants, and purple robes, which were on the kings of Midian, and besides the chains that were around their camels' necks. Then Gideon made it into an ephod and set it up in his city, Ophrah, and all the Israel played and all the Israel played the harlot with it there. It became a snare to Gideon and to his house. Thus Midian was subdued before the children of Israel, so that they lifted their heads no more, and the country was quiet for 40 years in the days of Gideon. Here's what basically boiled down to. If Gideon run in this whole place, okay? Do you remember Gideon was hiding and threshing wheat in the night because the Midianites and the Amalekites would come? The Israelites were under such bondage to the Midianites and the Amalekites. Every time the Israelites would come and plant seed or gather some livestock and flock, then the Midianites would come and the Amalekites would come and steal all their stuff. They would take it. So they had to learn how to work in the system, how to outsmart the people that they were under. It's like being under a system or a structure that you had to figure out how to maneuver to survive. So what they did was, Gideon, being from the Manasseh tribe, which also was the son of Joash, his son, he was the lowest among the low, okay? So God comes to Gideon when he's threshing wheat and says, listen, guys, you got to do something. You're the guy, you mighty man of valor, raise up. Now Gideon's going, what you're telling me that I am is not lining up with what I see. I see myself as one thing. My circumstances are saying something totally different, but you're telling me I'm all that. If you're telling me I'm all that, and by the hand of me, I'm going to come bring these people out of bondage, and I want to save an entire nation, first of all, I'm not qualified. Second of all, I don't feel myself faith-filled enough. I don't see myself big enough, and I don't think everybody else around me is going to listen to me and tell me that I'm okay to do this too. So I have every reason why I am not qualified to do this. Why, God, are you calling me to tell me I'm going to be the one to bring these people out? God says, you're going to do it. You're the one. So through a series of exchanges between him and God, Gideon begins to question God, and God in his patience allowed Gideon to question him. Gideon threw out some fleeces and some ideas and said, look, if you're really who you say you are and I'm really who you say I am, then give me some signs. So over the course of 2 or 3 requests, Gideon got some signs from the Lord that confirmed he was the guy. So here they go. They start their quest, and now as they're continuing to conquer, Gideon now has developed a confidence with some victories under his belt that now he's starting to believe he is who God said he was. See, it's through those challenges of life and through those victories that you begin to develop confidence. And I want you to realize something. Anointing flows. Anointing is the grace, the Spirit, the supernatural power of God on your life. It is the smearing of the presence of the Lord. It's like a stamp. It's like I want to say it this way. It's like an odor that you can't smell, but everybody else knows it's there. It gives you this fragrance and gives you this supernatural radiancy on your life that you can't understand or sometimes don't even notice, but other people around you begin to see it. Sometimes they'll see it before you will, okay? It is just a mark of the Spirit, the supernatural, that you can't tell by just naturally, all right? It will play out naturally, but it'll come from the supernatural. It'll come from God. So Gideon begins to now line his thinking up with this supernatural blessing on his life, and he's beginning now to see through a lens that allows him to have be confident and comfortable with the blessing of the Lord on his life. Many people have the blessing of the Lord on their life, but their mind doesn't allow them to receive the blessing of the Lord on their life. They're anointed and graced for a certain lifestyle and a certain way of living and to accomplish certain things, but they don't see themselves that way, so they're constantly in conflict with God when God says you have this on your life, and they're saying, I don't know if I believe it or not. So there's no confidence. And when you're confident, the more confident you become in him, the more release of that anointing and fragrance and supernatural lifestyle that you have. That's how it works, right? The anointing, the grace of God flows and comes and releases through confidence, okay? Now, not to say it won't release when you're not confident. I'm just saying the more confidence you become in it, the more aware you become, and the more you're able to flow in it without any hindrances and obstacles, okay? So now Gideon's come to this place, and he's fighting with the kings. The kings, he asked the kings to give him guys some food and some bread, and they said, yeah, right, you don't have these people. So Gideon comes back, and now where Gideon before was hiding, threshing wheat, now stands up and kills a couple kings. He's okay. He has no problem now going, listen, I'm pretty confident in my role right now, okay? Here was the problem. Because Gideon was releasing and working in the Midianite territory, Midian had become a real ruthless and a pagan society. Because, and if you'll remember, the first assignment that God gave Gideon was to go tear down the images and the altars of the foreign gods. So the people in that area had learned to live a different lifestyle and worldly lifestyle. Okay? So they're used to seeing images, and they're used to seeing things, and they're okay with that. So when Gideon got all these earrings, and they come back and they make this big, thing to the Lord, the people begin to see it as a shrine, and people begin to worship the creator or the creation of something more so than the creator of something. Right? Happens in life all the time. God gives a person a business or a family, or gives a person a job, a church, ministry, whatever it might be. And all of a sudden now that person begins to really give that thing more attention than they do God. And now God becomes secondary to that thing, whatever that thing is. And after all, God gave you the thing, right? So they begin to worship the hand of the Lord as opposed to the Lord himself, okay? And that happens to a lot of people. So for the 40 years, there was always this consternation going on in Israel. Midian was subdued before Israel, so they lifted up their heads no more, and the country was quiet for 40 years. So you had people that were pagan in some regard, but because of Gideon, it was quiet, and there was peace and rest in the land because of Gideon for 40 years. Now, then Zerubbabel, which was Gideon, remember? That's Gideon's changed name. Then Zerubbabel, the son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. Back to Gideon now. Gideon had 70 sons who were his own offspring, for he had many wives. Dear Lord. That's the first time I ever noticed that. 70 sons, because he had many offspring. That's a lot of kids. A lot of kids. Goodness gracious. And he had his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, whose name he called Abimelech. Now he has 70 kids, and there's one guy coming to the surface here, named Abimelech. Now Gideon was the son of Joash, died at a good old age, and was buried in the tomb of Joash, his father, in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. So it was, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel again played the harlot with the Baals and made Baal-berith their god. They just always go back and default back to worldly ways. Thus the children of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. Nor did they show kindness to the house of Zerubbabel, Gideon, in accordance with the good he had done for Israel. Then Abimelech, remember, the son of his concubine, the son of Zerubbabel, Gideon, went to Shechem to his mother's brothers and spoke with them and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, please speak in the hearing of all the men of Shechem, which is better for you, that all 70 of the sons of Zerubbabel reign over you, or that one reign over you. Remember that I am your own flesh and blood. And his mother's brothers spoke all these words concerning him in the hearing of all the men of Shechem, and their heart was inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, he is our brother. Now watch this. So they gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal-berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men, and they followed him. Then he went to his father's house of Ophrah, and killed his brothers, the 70 sons of Zerubbabel, on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Zerubbabel, was left because he hid himself. And all the men of Shechem gathered together, all of Beth Milo, and they went and made Abimelech king beside the terebinth tree at the pillar which was in Shechem. Now when they told Jotham, he went and stood on top of Mount Gerizim and lifted his voice and cried out, and he said to them, listen to me, you men of Shechem, that God may listen to you. The trees once went forth to anoint a king over them, and they said to the olive tree, reign over us. But the olive tree said to them, should I cease giving my oil, with which they honor God and men and go to sway over trees? Then the trees said to the fig tree, you come and reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, should I cease my sweetness and my good fruit, and go sway over trees? Then the tree said to the vine, you come and reign over us. But the vine said to them, should I cease my new wine, which cheers both God and men, and go to sway over trees? Then all the trees said to the bramble, you come and reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, if in truth you anoint me as king over you, then come and take shelter in my shade. But if not, let the fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. Now therefore, if you have acted in truth and sincerity in making Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Zerubbabel and his house, and have done him as he deserves, for my father fought for you, risked his life, and delivered you out of the hand of Midian, but you have risen up against my father's house in this day, and killed his 70 sons on one stone, and made Abimelech, the son of his female servant, king over the men of Shechem, because he is your brother. If then you have acted in truth and sincerity with Zerubbabel and with his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come from Abimelech and devour the men of Shechem and Beth Milo, and let the fire come from the men of Shechem and from Beth Milo and devour Abimelech. And Jotham ran away and fled, and he went to Beer and dwelt there for fear of Abimelech his brother. After Abimelech had reigned over Israel 3 years, while this guy was in hiding, God sent a spirit of ill will between Abimelech and the men of Shechem. And the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech, that the crime done to the 70 sons of Zerubbabel might be settled and their blood be laid upon Abimelech, their brother, who killed them, and on their men of Shechem, who aided him in the killing of his brothers. And the men of Shechem set men in ambush against him on the tops of mountains, and they robbed all who passed by them along that way, and it was told Abimelech. Now Gaal, the son of Ebed, came with his brothers and went over to Shechem, and the men of Shechem put their confidence in him. Now, you see what's happening? You see what's going on here? You got Abimelech now goes out and kills the 70 brothers, except the youngest one. And now he's been king. He's named king of this place. Everybody's looking at him. Now, for 3 years, everything looked like it was okay. The problem was now God sent a diversion. And all of a sudden now the people that were following him from Shechem are not following him anymore. There's tension and contention going on in the camp, in the land, fights. So they're turning on him, and now he doesn't know what to do because he set himself up. If you set yourself up, you got to keep yourself up. If you prop yourself up, you got to keep yourself propped up. But if God props it up, builds the house, those that labor, if God builds the house, then God will sustain the house. But if God doesn't build the house, he that labors and builds it labors in vain. You build it yourself. So what happened was that now he's got a real problem on his hands, and there's a diversion, and God sent it because God said, look, I'll let you be okay for a while, but after a while you're going to have some problems because the motivation became very clear. And here's what happens. So they went out into the fields, gathered grapes from the vineyards, because they now have a new guy that they're searching after because everybody's looking for somebody to follow. And Shechem guys had to have Abimelech. Now that they're having problems, they're going to find this other guy named Gaal. So they went out into the fields and they gathered grapes from their vineyards and trod them and made merry. And they went out into the house of God, their God, and ate and drank and cursed Abimelech. They turned on Abimelech now. Abimelech killed his brothers, all except the young one. And now they're all turning on him. So he has nobody. Then Gaal, the son of Ebed, said, who is Abimelech? And who is Shechem? That we should serve him. Is he not the son of Zerubbabel? And is not Zebul his officer? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, why should we serve them? Why should we serve any of these people? If only this people were under my authority, then I will remove Abimelech. So he said to Abimelech, increase your army and come out. When Zebul, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, the son of Ebed, his anger was aroused. Now he's mad. So this boy, even though he hid to save his life 3 years earlier, is now starting to proclaim. And keep in mind, he also is the youngest son of Gideon. So he's the youngest son of Gideon, and he has that same anointing that's on his life. You're going to see in just a second. And Gideon was placed upon him. And he sent messengers to Abimelech secretly saying, take note, Gaal the son of Ebed and his brothers have come to Shechem, and there they are to fortify the city against you. Now he's telling the truth. The son is. Now therefore get up by night, you and the people who are with you, and lie in wait in the field. So Gaal is the one they're kind of going to now from Shechem. Abimelech's over here. Now Gaal and the whole Shechem group are mad at the Israelites. Abimelech's mad at all of them. And now there's just a constant battle. And it shall be as soon as the sun is up in the morning that you shall rise early and rush upon the city. And when he and his people who are with him come out against you, you may then do to them as you find opportunity. So Abimelech and all the people who were with him rose by night and lay in wait against Shechem in 4 companies. Now the battle's set. When Gaal, the son of Ebed, went out and stood in the entrance of the city gate, Abimelech and the people who were with him rose from lying in wait. And when Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebul, look, people are coming down from the tops of the mountains. But Zebul said to him, you see the shadows of the mountains as if they were men. They really were men. So Gaal spoke again and said, see, people are coming down from the center of the land. And another company is coming from the diviner's terebinth tree. Then Zebul said to him, where indeed is your mouth now, with which you said, who is Abimelech, that we should serve him? Are not these the people whom you despised? Go out, if you will, and fight with them now. So Gaal went out, leading the men of Shechem, and fought with Abimelech. And Abimelech chased him, and he fled from him, and many fell wounded to the very entrance of the gate. Then Abimelech dwelt in Arumah, and Zebul drove out Gaal and his brothers so that they would not dwell in Shechem. Just constant fighting. And it came about on the next day that the people went out into the field, and they told Abimelech. So he took his people, divided them into 3 companies, 3 groups, laid in wait in the field, and he looked, and there were people coming out of the city, and he rose against them and attacked them. Then Abimelech and the company that was with him rushed forward and stood at the entrance of the gate of the city, and the other 2 companies rushed upon all who were in the fields and killed them. So Abimelech fought against the city all that day. He took the city and killed the people who were with it, and he demolished the city and sowed it with salt. Now when all the men of the tower of Shechem had heard that, they entered the stronghold and the temple of the god Berith. And it was told Abimelech that all the men of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. These are the same people that were with him at one time. Then Abimelech went up to the Mount Zalmon, he and all the people who were with him, and Abimelech took an axe in his hand and cut down a bow from the tree and took it and laid it on the shoulder. Then he said to the people who were with him, what you have seen me do, make haste and do as I've done. So each of the people likewise cut down its own, is it bow? Bow, and followed Abimelech, put them against the stronghold and set the stronghold on the fire above them, so that all the people of the tower of Shechem died, about 1,000 men and women. Then Abimelech went to Thebez, and he encamped against Thebez and took it. But there was a strong tower in the city, and all the men and the women and all the people of the city fled there and shut themselves in, and they went up to the top of the tower. So Abimelech came as far as the tower and fought against them, and he drew near the door of the tower to burn it with fire. But a certain woman dropped an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and crushed his skull. Then he called quickly to the young man, his armor bearer, and said to him, draw your sword and kill me, lest men say of me, a woman killed me. God forbid that. So his young man thrust him through, and he died. Now Abimelech's dead. Now watch this. And when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, they departed, every man to his own place. Kill the leader, they scatter. Right? Thus God repaid the wickedness of Abimelech, which he had done to his father by killing his 70 brothers. He died the same way. And all the evil of the men of the Shechem, God returned on their own heads, and on them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Zerubbabel. Jotham being the youngest one. Okay. That's fine. Go on to the next chapter. Chapter 10. Is everybody following this? I mean, this is a pretty powerful story. Let me just sum it up this way. What comes around goes around. Right? You hurt people, you get hurt. You jockey for position, somebody jockeys you for position. You think you have loyalty. If people are following you or people are connected to you only because they're against somebody else, then they're going to probably turn against you. If they protest, if you raise up protesters, they'll protest you. I remember a guy was preaching one time in a church I was a part of, and he preached, and he was just down in Carrie Underwood and everything. He's down in all these people. I mean, just down in it. And he was standing up and talking about against rock music, against country music, and against all this stuff. And all these people in the church were going, yeah. They're standing up, yeah. High-fiving each other. I'm sitting there taking it all in. After the service is over, he said, man, I bet I'll probably never get invited back to preach here again, huh? I said, and he said, nobody would come. I said, no, that problem is they would come. That's the problem. They would come. I said, and after they got done hearing you protest everything you're against, eventually they're going to protest you. Yep. And they do. Yep. People are finicky. It's just the way it is. They are finicky. So what you have to do is you have to be pure in your motivation, and you have to help people make decisions based on themselves, not based on what you think they should decide. So when they do turn, it's them turning based on a decision they're making internally. Or if they stay connected, it's based on something they stay connected because it's something they see here on the inside. That's what Gideon was trying to get them all to see, was I'm going to tear down these gods that are not of Jehovah God, so we have one God. If we can't, people talk about getting unity all the time. You got unity. You're only ever going to be unified in the spirit. Right. You're never going to be unified in the flesh because preferences are preferences. People prefer blue over green. Yep. Right? It's just the way it is. So you're never going to get people to totally agree in the flesh. But in the spirit, we're all centered, and the centrality is Christ, which means when you put Christ up there as your measuring stick, we all come short. And it's hard to look at somebody else and judgmental and judge them when you're being measured by the same stick, if you know what I'm saying. So this person over here does more wrong than I've done. I can't look at them wrong because if I look at them only and compare them to me, I could probably look down on them, or they can look down on me. But if I compare to Christ and he has forgiven them as much as he's forgiven them, he's forgiven me. So you're not comparing who's worse or who's done the most wrong or who's better, because that's all based on flesh and based on humanity. But when it all comes to reality, humanity is just frail, weak, and it's his divinity. It's the beauty of it is when our humanity allows us to embrace our humanity, but also invite his divinity and his supernatural power working inside of us. I don't know why he does it. I don't know why he chose to do it, but he did. He chose to take weak, frail people with our filthiness and our flesh and somehow allow himself to be deposited. The God of the universe, God himself, decided to reduce himself down in some capacity to allow himself to live within contaminated flesh. So but because he's so holy, this is going to sound nuts, but because he's so holy, when perfection comes and resides in imperfection, if you focus on your imperfection, you make the perfection imperfect. But if you focus on the perfection, then your imperfection becomes perfect. Right? Put good, clear water in a dirty cup. If you're focused on the dirty cup, you won't drink the water. But if you're thirsty enough, you'll drink the water. Right? But if the cup gets filled up with water and the cup is dirty, and the cup keeps getting filled up and there's no end to the water coming in it, guess what happens to that dirty cup eventually? It'll clean it out. And then the water and the cup become clean together. So the key is, if you think you're going to have to get all the dirt off before the pure good water comes in, you're in trouble. It's the good water that gets the dirt out. Right? So it's really more about him than us. That's important to know. Without that information, without that perspective of life, we're going to miss something. It's him. He is chosen by his master plan to dwell and reside in imperfection. And because he's so perfect and died and he was perfect and came in and took our place in imperfection, he now has made this perfect. Why? Because he resides in it. Yes. So when he says, be you holy, for I am holy, he's not saying, hey, I need you to compare yourself to me and try to do really well because I'm holy, I need you to be holy. Right. Be holy because I'm holy. In other words, I'm holy, I made you holy, I live in you. Right? That makes sense? So be holy, be holy for I am holy. He has made you holy because he's holy. So now your perspective has to live through the lens of life like, my God, I'm holy. Now what do I do? You got to live holy. How do you live holy? By allowing him to live through you. You take on his identity and recognize that you didn't get it based on you. You got to get based on him. And the more that becomes real to you, the more you begin to see it in your head and your mind begins to transform. Right? Be ye not conformed to this world, but ye be transformed by the renewal, continual processing of your mind, of identifying who you are and allowing your mind to line up with a new identity in him. Make sense? So you're now seeing yourself different because he sees you different. If you were having a conversation with Jesus in the flesh, and he walked right in here, and Richie's standing here, and Jesus is standing here, they're having this conversation, and Jesus would say, man, Richie, you're incredible. Richie said, well, I make a lot of mistakes. Well, you're still incredible. Yeah, but you don't know. Sometimes I just say things I shouldn't even say. Richie, why do you always focus on that? Right. Whenever you start championing your shortcomings, you really are minimizing what Christ has done for you. Right? And people out there don't like it because they want you to minimize they want you to maximize your shortcomings and talk about your shortcomings because they want to point out your shortcomings. Misery loves company. Yeah, misery loves company. That's right. You see what I'm talking about? So it's a whole new world. I could sing that one. It's a whole new world. Why? Because for whatever reason, he decided to do something that you couldn't do on your own. So now you have to live differently. Guy was homeless, and he had didn't even know it, but he was homeless for a long time, and he was alcoholic and lived from dumpster to dumpster, and shed to shed, and riverbank to riverbank, shelter to shelter, and he was homeless for years, and he didn't know it, but he had a relative that passed away. He had a brother that was pretty well off. His brother was trying to find him. Finally, one day they tracked him down, and they came up to him and they said, "Brother, we got some money left to us. I mean, a lot of money, and you're in the will. It belongs to you. I get part, you get part, and it's going to set you up for the rest of your life." And the man looked up at him and he said, "God, I don't know if I could live. I've learned to live from survival. I can live this life, but I don't know that I can live that life. I think I'll just pass."
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
I said, I think I'll just pass. And the brother said, "No, you don't have an opportunity to just pass because I'm going to force you to come up out of your environment, and I'm going to take you up out of your environment and force you to live in this one." And for months and months and months, this man, he took his brother into his house, forced him to clean up, learn to live, and the man had to learn to rethink how to see himself with prosperity as opposed to surviving from place to place. All he ever known was, because it's all he ever was ever addressed as, was a drunk and a homeless guy, a bum, from place to place. And then finally, he started seeing himself going, I got to have a reason to live. And the real reason to live was somebody that lived before him saw him worthy enough to invest in him and give him money. And his brother showed him some love. But before there was ever money in the picture, the brother could never get him to stay in the house with him. Couldn't do it. He would never do it. He said, I'm not staying in the house. He said, I'm comfortable out here. These are my family. These are my friends. They understand me. I understand them. We survived together. And they learned to live in that lifestyle. While one after another were dying on the streets. It's like this. And all of a sudden, it was his time. And he went, I got to come up out of here. I've got to. You know why? Because he had a kid that he had younger. And his kid didn't know his dad other than being a bum. And something came up out of him and said, you know what? I've got to be a father. I've got to set an example for him because I don't want him to have to learn to live the survival. Even though I've mastered the game of survival, it's too hard of a lifestyle for me to have that for my kids. I got something to leave him now, yeah. And before he felt inadequate and unworthy that I didn't have anything to leave him. I didn't have anything to give him. And now I've got something I can give him. So he first had self-worth before you can give self-worth. That's what Christ did for us, was give us self-worth. It's important. Right? I'm telling you, it's where we're living right now. If most people could see, because see, most of us, if not all of us, have learned to live and navigate in the world of our confine. We create our own little constraints in our own world, and we learn to live on it. And occasionally we'll push on the borders occasionally and enlarge it. But for the most part, we kind of learn to live within our area of comfort. And we know how to manage inside of that world. But the Lord has wanted us to expand and go beyond. And from the time you break outside of the walls that you convince yourself that you have to live in and to get out there, out in here is dangerous and scary because it's uncharted territory. You don't know how to think out in here, but you do know how to think in here. It's instinct. Here you've thought it before because you've been here before. Already thought it, been there, done that. I know this. And you're able to minister and talk to other people that have been inside that world too, or that are just now coming into that world because you've already been there. Right. Take you under my wing. I'll see how it works. This is how you live in this world. But the reality of it is, you don't want to make somebody comfortable in the limitations that you've created for yourself. You got to encourage yourself to continue to grow and develop, and come outside of that thing. And how you do that here is what new challenges, what new dreams, ideas, thoughts, opportunities, doors, what are those things that God brings to you that opens up a door that takes you outside of the area that you've learned to manage? And outside of there, you walk out and you have to learn to manage a whole new life. But the good thing about it is God He's not just the God of your area that you've learned to manage. He's also the God that opens the door to get you to a new place to expand the areas of your life. Make sense? It's good stuff. Think of Gideon. Let's just talk about it. We've got 5 minutes. Gideon says, I'm perfectly happy, content. I don't like it. I know there's a better way, but this is what the life's dealt me. I'm just the guy that's threshing wheat in the wine press at night, and I'm doing a noble thing because our people are in bondage, and I'm doing everything I can just to help us get some food and some stuff. So I've learned to navigate life and work in life and function in life within this system, the structure of even though it's not really necessarily a prison, it's a confined area of life that I've learned to manage it. And I'm okay here simply because I've learned to manage it. The alternative is dying. The alternative is living out here in the madness. Alternative is living out here trying to do something during the day and the Midianites and the Amalekites kill me. At least we have food. At least I have a roof over my head. At least I can keep my head up and talk to my kids. Right? Anybody know what I'm talking about? At least it's okay here. My God, I mean, I could think of a lot. I've been in a lot worse positions than I am right now.
Yeah.
Anybody know what I'm talking about? So you're right here. Okay? And all of a sudden God comes. Says, hey, guess what? You may not know it, but you've learned to manage yourself in your prison, and I'm bringing you out. And the reason I'm bringing you out is because it's not just about you. I'm bringing you out because you're bringing out other people.
Yeah.
First argument you make with God, God, do you know who you're talking to? You know how many times I've fallen and how many times I've failed? Do you know how many times, do you know I'm not educated enough, I'm not qualified enough, I've not done, God, do you know? Are you sure you're asking me? God, maybe you're telling me to tell somebody else. Right? Because I got good friends, but you're calling me? Yeah. But do you realize I don't have a family name? I have no experience in this, and it doesn't matter. I've called you. What? To come up out. Why? Because for 13 or 14 years, you've been learning to live within this system of independency. But really, you think you've been independent, but really you've just created a defense wall that you live behind. Let me give you an example of this, because I got to keep going on this. I can start this next week too. Trump wants to build a wall at our southern border, right? The question is it to keep people in or to keep people out?
It does both.
It's one wall. It's not a wall that says, okay, this is the wall for the out, this is the wall for the in. It's one wall. The reason Trump is talking this wall and this immigration thing is a picture, figuratively, of the world and the church.
Right.
So are we trying to keep people from coming in, or are we trying to create security only for us? So what am I telling you? What walls are you building around you that keep people out? Or is it really just keeping you safe within? Because never was intended for people from the United States not to go to Mexico and visit. Never was intended for Mexico people to come and visit the United States the right way, right? It is about this. And every one of us create these walls of security around us so we can learn to live and manage and function within this place without having to deal with that stuff. But I'm telling you, God's calling you out of that to another place that's bigger and better. And you're going to have to look at yourself and go, oh, God, what do I do? See, here's something that's happening right across the land. There's probably not a day go by that I'm not talking to somebody like this. The wall that they've created, it's invisible for the natural eye, but it's a wall. It's a religious wall. You think you've got, because you've been in a long time, you think God's got it all figured out. This is the way it works. So then God, what he does is allows your humanity to get you into a situation or a place. And when your humanity gets your situation to a place, your former and current way of thinking about God won't get you out of your mess. It won't restore you. It won't help you. It will indict you. But that's not where you have to end, because you don't want to just stop at indicting, because what you've learned about God will hammer you. So God says, I'll let your humanity show yourself something so I can show you my grace that will help you through the imperfection of your humanity. All right? Give me an example. Guy got it all figured out. Everything's good. Everything's good. I got it. I know God is this way, and I've learned to function with God, and me and God are all that. Me and God got our own thing going, okay? All of a sudden, my view of God is limited into what I've already learned. But God is an ever-increasing kingdom and ever-increasing revelation.
Yes.
So I've learned him in this box that I've created for him. So people come for years and try to tell you a little bit about God outside that box. But you go, no, he didn't fit in that box. Because why? I already got him figured out. All of a sudden God says, well, because you wouldn't listen to them tell you and explain to you how it was. I'll just do this. I'll just let your box be penetrated. And your humanity now will cause you to be something, and you'll see your filthiness or see something of your failure, and it'll allow it to come open. And then you're going to go, oh, God, I need you. And all of a sudden now, God will trump your box to show you his goodness and mercy in the middle of your situation. And all of a sudden now, you'll see him different or additional to what you've already known. I'm preaching to somebody today. That's the truth. That's just what he'll do. He'll say, well, I can't get it to you any other way, so I'll just let your... If you want your humanity and your unrenewed mind to be God, then I'll just let it be God. I'll still come in and rescue you, but it's going to be after you've created yourself a situation. And then God will come in and restore. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. It's a process daily, right? Yeah, I can't go any further. There's 2 trees in the garden. Tree of life, tree of knowledge of good and evil. Then all the other trees, or all the other truths. God says, eat all the truths you want. Right? But don't eat that one. Which one? The one that says all these other ones are not.
Yeah.
The one that says you're lacking something. That tree, if you eat of that, you feel like you're lacking something, guess what? You'll not eat all those trees.
Right.
So what if there is, just is, good and evil on one tree, the knowledge of good and evil on one tree, and the tree of life is everything else? What if you could do anything you wanted to do? You just have to know that there's consequences for all your decisions. Sequential, sequence, be not conformed, but be transformed. Your decisions create sequential series of decisions. So make sure you eat of the tree of life so your decisions create sequences that are good, that transform, not conform. Consequences. Make sense? Father, in Jesus' name, we'll see you at 11 o'clock. Amen.